It began on a rainy Tuesday, the kind of morning when puddles eat the sidewalks and the sky forgets how to be blue. Students rushed into Jefferson Middle School, shaking umbrellas and stomping boots. But that day, Mr. Coleman saw something. Odd. A boy stood alone just beyond the school gates, soaked from head to toe. Not just damp, dripping, as if he had climbed out of a lake. His clothes clung to his skin, mismatched and too old-fashioned. His shirt looked like something out of the 60s, wide collar, faded stripes, and a missing button. His shoes were untied, one of them missing its sole. He didn't speak. He just stood there, blinking rain out of his eyes, shivering but not asking for help. Mr. Coleman had been teaching English for over 20 years. He'd seen his share of troubled kids, runaways, foster cases, even students who didn't speak a word of English. But there was something in this boy's eyes. Something timeless, tired, ancient. "Hey, buddy," Coleman said gently, holding his umbrella over them both. "You lost?" The boy didn't answer, but his gaze flicked toward the school building, and then back to the overgrown field behind it. Just for a second, Coleman followed his eyes and saw nothing but a patch of wet grass and an old stone well, partially hidden by vines. Then, without a word, the boy turned and walked inside. That week, he was enrolled in the school under the name Tommy Riley. No file, no transcripts, no medical records, just a temporary placement note from the county office. The secretary said the system was backed up and that the caseworker would send the rest later. But later never came. Tommy was strange from the start. He sat quietly in the back of the room, always watching. He never raised his hand, never spoke unless directly asked. And even then, he gave short, polite answers, like he was afraid of saying too much. But the strangest thing was his clothes. Every day, they were different. Not just different shirts or pants, different decades. Once he wore a pair of suspenders. Another day, a knit sweater with elbow patches and slacks. His shoes were often scuffed, out of place, sometimes too big or too small. Always wet. Always cold. Coleman couldn't stop thinking about it. He started watching Tommy more closely. Once, in class, Tommy stared at a history textbook and whispered, "This is all wrong." "What's wrong, Tommy?" Coleman had asked, but Tommy just shook his head, almost embarrassed. "Nothing. Just thought I remembered something different." Another time, during a fire drill, Tommy flinched at the sound of the bell. Not in surprise, but in pain. He doubled over slightly, breathing hard, as if the sound triggered something buried deep inside. Coleman approached him gently. "You okay?" Tommy nodded, still pale. "Sir, what year is it again?" The question hung in the air like a thundercloud. A joke? Trauma? Confusion? "It's 2025, Coleman said softly. Tommy looked down at his soaked shoes, and for the first time, he whispered something under his breath. "I missed it again." That night, Coleman couldn't sleep. He searched through county records for Tommy Riley. Nothing. No foster placement, no child services file, no missing persons report. It was like the boy didn't exist. He even walked out to the old well behind the school the next morning, just after sunrise. Fog blanketed the grass, and the air smelled of rust and rain. The well was covered in moss, half swallowed by the earth. No rope, no bucket, just blackness. He leaned over carefully and called, "Tommy?" Nothing but silence. But that day, Tommy showed up again, soaked. Same look in his eyes, same silence, and Coleman swore he hadn't seen the boy walk through the front gate. By the second week, the dream started. Coleman would see flashes of drowning, cold water closing in, shouts echoing from high above, boys screaming from barred windows. A sign that read Redwood Home for Boys, Est, 1902, and always. That face, Tommy's, pushing upward, gasping for air, over and over again. He woke up drenched in sweat. On a rainy Thursday, Coleman finally confronted him. "Tommy," he said during lunch, when they were alone in the classroom, "I think you want someone to know." Tommy looked up from the sandwich he never ate. His eyes were hollow. "I'm not crazy," he whispered. "I don't think you are." "I'm not lying. I don't think that either. I don't know how to fix it." "Fix what?" Tommy hesitated. "Then, I die every night." Coleman blinked. "What do you mean?" "I wake up wet. I come here. I try to change things. But I always end up there again. Back at the bottom of that well." Coleman stared at him, unsure whether to call the counselor or keep listening. "I'm from 1964, Tommy said simply, with a raw kind of resignation. "I tried to escape the orphanage. I fell. I think I drowned. But I didn't die. I just started repeating the same day. Over and over. For 60 years, the room felt colder. The hum of the fluorescent lights buzzed louder. I think I was supposed to save someone," Tommy added. "But I don't know who, or when, or how." Mr. Coleman didn't know what disturbed him more, the calmness in Tommy's voice when he said it, or how real it sounded. "I die every night." He repeated those words in his head the rest of the day. He couldn't teach, couldn't eat. And when the final bell rang, he found himself standing alone by the old stone well behind the school, staring into its mouth like it might blink back. That night, he pulled out an old shoebox of letters and cards from former students, kids. He'd helped through grief, anger, abuse, confusion. Maybe Tommy was just another one of them, with trauma so deeply buried it was taking shape as hallucination or fantasy. But deep down, Coleman didn't believe that. He'd seen kids pretend, invent, act out for attention. Tommy wasn't pretending. He was reliving. The next morning, just before dawn, Coleman waited by the edge of the field with a thermos of coffee. Fog rolled in low and thick, blanketing the grass like ghosts laying down to rest. He stood near the well, hidden behind a tree, and waited. It was 6:03 a.m. when the silence broke. Faint splash. Then coughing. Then the sound of something climbing, hands slipping on old stone. Wet shoes scraping mossy walls. Coleman rushed forward just as a figure pulled itself from the well's edge and collapsed onto the grass. Tommy. Soaked, shivering, dressed in a tattered gray uniform shirt and brown wool trousers. The same outfit from Coleman's dream. Tommy blinked at him, stunned. "You're not supposed to be here. And you're not supposed to come out of a well every morning," Coleman replied softly, holding out his coat. "We're both breaking some rules." Tommy hesitated, then took the coat. He looked away, ashamed. "You saw me? I had to know it was real." He nodded once. "It's always real, but only to me." That day, Coleman called in sick. He brought Tommy to his own house, a quiet, cluttered place near the woods with coffee stains on the floor and books in every corner. Tommy sat by the fireplace, sipping hot chocolate like it was the first warm drink he'd had in years. For hours, they talked. And Tommy told him everything. He had grown up in Redwood Home for Boys, a state-run orphanage on the outskirts of town. Closed now, abandoned and swallowed by vines. Back then, it was run by a man named Frederick Halbert, a former pastor turned director with a strict, cruel philosophy. The kind of man, Tommy said, who believed beatings could cure bad dreams. Tommy had no memory of his real parents. Only the orphanage, the cold showers, the silence between the boys. Talking was discouraged, questions punished. Any act of rebellion, even reading the wrong book, was met with discipline. But one night, he overheard something. Halberd and two other men speaking in low voices in the chapel. About money, missing children, and a fire that was never supposed to be reported. I think they were selling us, Tommy whispered. Or at least, some of us. He tried to escape. One stormy night in 1964, he ran, barefoot, soaked, heart pounding. He crossed the woods, reached the old well near the edge of town, but the ground gave way beneath him. He fell. And then, he woke up back in the orphanage. Same day, same clothes, same storm. I tried again the next time, he said. And the next, every loop, I ran faster, hid better, climbed trees, broke windows, changed routes. But you always ended up back there, Coleman said quietly. Yeah, until one time, the 42nd loop, I think, I managed to climb out of the... Well, instead of falling all the way in, I ran to the school, and that's when the loop changed. Each time Tommy emerged from the well, the day reset, but not completely. Things were slightly different. The names on the school bulletin board, the food in the cafeteria. Once he saw a girl he swore didn't exist before. Another time, a teacher was missing. I think I'm getting closer, Tommy said, to the right version of the day, the one that lets me leave the loop. How would you know if it's the right one? Tommy looked at him. Because something will happen that never did before. Coleman stood in front of a whiteboard in his study. He started writing down everything. Tommy's loop's clothes from different eras' voices. From the chapel names of boys he remembered details of Halbert's routine symbols, carved into the orphanage walls together. They built that timeline, and something strange emerged. Tommy's memories didn't just repeat, they drifted. Events shifted across versions. A boy named Marcus was punished in one loop, but missing in the next. A dog barked every Tuesday morning, except in the loops where the janitor didn't show up. The pattern wasn't circular. It was spiraling inward. Coleman circled a date, November 18th, 1964. That's the date you always start with? Tommy nodded. Coleman looked it up. There had been a fire at Redwood home that night. Official report claimed faulty wiring. 3 boys died. One body was never found. Do you know the boys who died? Yes, Tommy said, his voice shaking. They were my friends. And the one they never found? Tommy looked down. Me. At midnight, after Tommy fell asleep on the couch, Coleman drove to the edge of town. He found the old Redwood property, now just ruins covered in ivy. The iron gate hung broken. Moonlight spilled across shattered stone and rusted beams. He walked through what was once the chapel, stepped over burned pews and broken glass. There, behind the altar, half buried in soot, he found a brass plate for those we could not save. Behind it, a trapdoor dot creaked open. Inside, papers, photographs, letters with initials, and a small journal, the name scrawled in pencil. Thomas Riley. Back at home, he flipped through it. Most pages were blank, but a few had scribbled. Drawings, maps of the orphanage, names of boys, dates circled in red dot, and one final page. If you're reading this, it means I didn't make it out, but I hope another version of me did. Coleman closed the journal slowly. His hands were shaking. The next morning, at 6:03 a.m., he waited by the well again. Tommy climbed out, wearing the same clothes Coleman had seen in the journal's drawings. When he saw Coleman holding the notebook, something in his face changed. You found it. You left it, Coleman replied. In at least one version, Tommy nodded, and smiled for the first time. Tommy stared at the journal in Mr. Coleman's hands like it was something holy, like proof that his fractured memories hadn't been invented, that he wasn't invented. He reached out, almost reverently, and ran a finger across his own name, written on the cover. "This is real," he whispered. "It's me." Mr. Coleman nodded, and it proved something else too. That one version of you got far enough to leave this behind. You're not just repeating the past. You're breaking into pieces of a future. Tommy looked up, hope flickering behind his tired eyes. "So I can end this?" "I think we can. But we need to figure out why the loop exists in the first place. What's anchoring it? And why?" "It always starts with that same night in 1964. Tommy hesitated, then quietly said, "The fire." Mr. Coleman waited. "I caused it," Tommy said. "That night, I was hiding in the chapel, and I knocked over a lantern. I was trying to escape with the boys, Marcus, Eli, David, but I tripped. The flames spread fast. I tried to go back for them." His voice cracked. "I think I died in that fire. And the loop, it's me trying to fix it, over and over." Mr. Coleman sat in silence. The weight of the confession, of a child blaming himself for a tragedy, was almost unbearable. "But the records say 3 boys died," he said gently. "Not 4. I know. That's why I thought. Maybe I escaped. Maybe part of me made it." He looked up. "But I don't remember anything past the fire, just the well, and waking up. Again and again." The next few days became a quiet war against time itself. Each morning at 6:03, Tommy emerged from the well, sometimes in different clothes, with small changes in detail. Once, his hair was shorter. Another time, he spoke with a slight accent. Mr. Coleman documented everything. Date, weather, clothing, language, demeanor. The loops weren't just chronological resets. They were dimensional echoes, fragments of possibilities bleeding into each other. Somewhere in the multiverse, Tommy had survived. Somewhere else, he hadn't. On the 4th morning, Tommy didn't speak right away. He simply held up a crumpled photograph, soaked from the climb. It was a black and white photo of 3 boys standing in front of the Redwood Chapel. One of them was unmistakably Tommy. The other 2? Marcus and Eli. The back was labeled in smeared pencil. "The last time we were free." Mr. Coleman took the photo and stared at it for a long time. Then he said, "We need to go back." That night, flashlight in hand, they returned to the ruins of Redwood home. The air was heavy, damp with the scent of mold and scorched wood. The chapel's frame stood crooked, like a skeleton caught mid-fall. Tommy moved differently here. He didn't flinch at the shadows. His steps were confident. It was like the place recognized him, or he recognized it in a way deeper than memory. They found the trapdoor again. The journal was gone, proof that it had come from a different loop. But beneath the floorboards, they uncovered something new. A rusted metal lockbox, sealed tight. Inside, a half-burned letter with Halbert's signature, requesting a transfer of funds to a private account. A list of boys marked with or X, a faded birth certificate for Thomas Riley. Born July 3, 1954. Parents, unknown. Status, ward of the state. And finally, a cassette tape. It was labeled, Confession, November 17, 1964. Back in Coleman's house, he dusted off his old tape recorder and slid in the cassette. Static. Then a man's voice, harsh, desperate. "I never wanted this to happen. They told me it would just be funding, just names on a list. I didn't know what they were really doing. God help me. I didn't know. It was Halbert. They were taking the boys. Selling them, I think. Experiments, relocations, the details were never clear. But when Tommy found out, when he tried to run, I panicked. I told them. They said they'd reset the situation, burn the files, burn the building if they had to. I didn't mean for them to die. Not Marcus. Not Eli. Not Tommy. A pause, then trembling. If anyone finds this, I'm sorry. I deserve whatever's coming. The tape ended. Tommy sat still, eyes closed. "It wasn't your fault, mister." Coleman said, "They planned it. They used you." Tommy nodded slowly. "But why am I the one trapped?" Mr. Coleman stared into the fireplace for a moment before replying. "Maybe because you tried to stop it. Maybe you're the only one who did. And the universe. It kept giving you another chance." The next morning, something changed. When Tommy came out of the well, he was dry. He looked around, confused. "Did it rain?" Mr. Coleman's heart skipped. "No, it hasn't rained in 3 days." Tommy checked his watch, a cheap silver piece Coleman had loaned him. It read 6:03 a.m., but the hands were stuck, not ticking. "Something's different," Tommy said. That day at school, the fire alarm was pulled unexpectedly during first period. Everyone evacuated. But when Coleman checked the panel, there was no fault. No student claimed responsibility. It just went off. On the lawn, Tommy watched the students gather. "I've seen this before," he said softly. "But only in the loops where Marcus and Eli lived." Coleman turned sharply. "What do you mean?" "In some versions. I saved them, got them out of the building. But the loops collapsed anyway. I thought I failed. But maybe those versions still exist." Coleman stared at him. "You think other versions of you, of them, are out there?" "I don't just think," Tommy said. He pointed across the lawn. 2 boys stood under a tree, laughing, unfamiliar to Coleman. But Tommy froze. His mouth opened slightly. His voice cracked. "That's Marcus." They ran over. Coleman introduced himself to the boys, trying to keep calm. "New transfer students?" he asked. "Sort of," Marcus said, tilting his head. "We don't remember much. Woke up here a few days ago. Everything feels fuzzy." The other boy, Eli, nodded. "But we know this place. Like déjà vu. Crazy, huh?" Tommy just stared, speechless. Marcus narrowed his eyes. "Hey, do I know you?" Tommy opened his mouth to speak, but no. Words came out. For the first time in years, he was the one stunned into silence. Later, Coleman and Tommy sat outside the school, the sun low in the sky. The photograph of the 3 boys rested on the bench between them. "They came through," Tommy said. "Somehow, they made it out." Coleman nodded. "I think you're close now. Closer than ever." Tommy turned to him. "What do I have to do?" Coleman smiled faintly. "Finish the day. Don't run. Don't hide. Just live it. Maybe this is the version where the loop ends." Tommy looked up at the sky. For once, it wasn't raining. That morning arrived quietly, the sky a pale gray. That hinted at lingering fog, but no rain. Tommy stood by the well's edge, his soaked clothes already drying in the cool breeze. He stared into the dark mouth of the well, as if searching for answers in its depths. Today was different. He could feel it, the weight of time pressing against him like a silent wave. Mr. Coleman approached with a familiar gentle smile, carrying the battered journal and the black and white photo of the 3 boys. Their eyes met. No words were needed. Together, they stepped toward the school gates, where a restless energy buzzed in the air, as if the walls themselves awaited a reckoning. Inside the school, life unfolded in strange and subtle ways. Hallways buzzed with whispers. Students moved faster. Conversations cut short as rumors swirled. A sealed basement beneath the building had been discovered, a place forgotten by time. Teachers and staff spoke in hushed tones about the past, about secrets some hoped would stay buried. Tommy's heart beat faster. The basement was where it all had to end. Throughout the morning, Tommy noticed small but telling changes around him. A substitute teacher with unfamiliar eyes, a new janitor quietly tidying the halls, and a clock in the main office ticking steadily for the first time in decades. It was as if the school itself was shaking off a long slumber. By midday, Coleman had arranged a brief meeting with the principal, who reluctantly granted permission to explore the basement under strict supervision. Armed with flashlights and cautious hope, Tommy and Coleman descended the narrow staircase. Leading to the depths, the basement was a time capsule, thick with dust and silence. Old lockers stood like sentinels, their paint peeling and chipped. Faded posters of school events from decades ago fluttered slightly in the cold draft. Yet amidst the decay, there was something alive in the air, a pulse of memories waiting to be heard. At the far end, a mural stretched across the wall, vibrant despite the years. Boys running freely under a sunlit sky, their faces bright with hope. At the mural's center was a small brass plaque, worn but legible, for the boys who dared to dream beyond the walls. Tommy's fingers brushed over the words, a tear escaping down his cheek. The message felt like a whisper from the past, a promise kept despite the shadows. Suddenly, a faint creak echoed. Coleman turned just in time to see a hidden door swing open, revealing a narrow, winding passageway carved into stone. The walls bore strange, repeating symbols, circles, broken by a single line, etched deeply as if to protect or warn. "This is it," Tommy breathed. "The secret they never wanted found." Their footsteps echoed as they ventured deeper. The air grew colder, damp with the scent of earth and forgotten stories. At the passage's end lay a small chamber bathed in soft, eerie light. A room, untouched by time. In the center sat a heavy wooden box, carved with the same mysterious symbols. Tommy's hands trembled as he opened it, revealing a trove of forgotten relics. Yellowed letters tied with fraying ribbons, faded photographs of boys smiling with a rare freedom, and a small, delicate music box with intricate engravings. The letters told a story no one had heard. The Redwood home was more than an orphanage. It had been a refuge for children fleeing danger, operated secretly by a resistance group determined to protect the most vulnerable. The fire, the destruction, the silence that followed, all part of a tragic cover up. The leader of this group? Frederick Halbert. Tommy's voice broke as he read aloud from one letter. "I never wished for cruelty, only protection." The fire was meant to shield them from worse horrors beyond these walls. If these words survive, let them be a testament to the fight for freedom, even in the darkest of times. Coleman smiled sadly. Sometimes the line between hero and villain is thinner than we realize. As the haunting melody of the music box filled the chamber, the walls seemed to shimmer with light. Tommy felt warmth spreading through his chest, a peace he had not known in decades. When the light faded, Tommy was no longer soaked or tired. He was just a boy, whole and free. They returned to the surface, where Marcus and Eli waited, smiling and unburdened. The three boys stood together, no longer prisoners of time. Outside, the sun broke through the clouds, casting golden light across the schoolyard, a new dawn for past and present. The golden light of morning spilled over the schoolyard, casting long shadows from the oak tree that stood like a silent guardian. Tommy, Marcus, and Eli stood under its canopy, shoulders touching, their faces turned toward the rising sun. None of them spoke at first. The quiet felt sacred, like the pause after a storm when the sky clears and the world feels new again. Mister? Coleman stood a few steps away, watching the three boys with a reverence he couldn't explain. They had been ghosts to time, trapped by history. Now, for the first time, they looked alive. "It feels different," Marcus whispered. "Like, I'm still me, but not stuck anymore." Tommy nodded slowly. "I don't feel the water on my skin. I didn't wake up wet this morning. For the first time, I just woke up." Eli kicked at the leaves near his feet. "So now what? What do we do?" Tommy looked at Mr. Coleman, eyes searching. "Yeah. What happens now?" Inside the school, whispers buzzed like bees. The discovery of the old basement, a sealed chamber. The letters, it had all made headlines in the local papers. Forgotten children of Redwood Orphanage, read one article. History uncovered beneath Westbrook High, said another. Some of the faculty still didn't believe the story. Time loops? Boys from 1964? But the superintendent had seen the letters. DNA tests were being ordered, and the town's historical society had stepped in to verify everything they could. What mattered most, however, was that Tommy was no longer a mystery. His existence had been acknowledged. He was real, and he was staying. That afternoon, Mr. Coleman walked with Tommy to the school office, where a social worker was waiting. She was a kind-looking woman in her 40s, named Melissa Harding. Her eyes were gentle, but they flickered with disbelief as she looked at the boy in front of her. "I've never handled a case like this before," she admitted. "Technically, you don't exist in any recent government records. But we found your birth record from 1952. It's aged paper, but the state is validating it. We're going to make this right." She handed Tommy a manila envelope. Inside was a new birth certificate, school enrollment papers, and documents granting him temporary foster care under the school, district's guardianship until the family could be arranged. Tommy's hands trembled. "I can go to school like everyone else?" Melissa smiled. "Yes, starting tomorrow. You're officially a student at Westbrook High. No more hiding, no more pretending." Mr. Coleman placed a hand on Tommy's shoulder. "You're not alone. Anymore." The following weeks brought change faster than Tommy could process. He moved into a temporary foster home with a retired librarian named Mrs. Cavanaugh, who baked pies every Sunday and taught him how to use a microwave. He was given clothes, a proper room, and a bed he didn't have to wake up from soaking wet. School was strange at first. He was decades behind in everything: culture, slang. Even the way students dressed felt like stepping onto another planet. But Mr. Coleman made sure he had support. A tutor helped him after school. Marcus and Eli stayed close, introducing him to music, movies, and even video games. But nights were hardest. Tommy often lay awake staring at the ceiling, wondering if it had all truly ended. He feared waking up again in 1964, alone in the rain, back in the well. One night, unable to sleep, he knocked on Mr. Coleman's door. "Is it okay if I sit here for a bit?" he asked. Coleman nodded and motioned him in. Of course. They sat in silence for a while. Tommy stared into the darkened living room, fingers twisting in his lap. "I keep thinking it'll reset," he said finally. "That all of this is just another version. Like the other times I thought I'd made it." Coleman leaned forward. "But this time you didn't do it alone. This time someone else saw you. Believed you." Tommy looked up. "Does that mean it's real?" Coleman nodded. "It does." 2 months later, the school board hosted a memorial event, a day of remembrance for the lost boys of Redwood Home. A garden was planted in their honor behind the school, right where the well once stood. A plaque read, "For the children who waited in silence. May time never forget you again." Students, staff, and members of the community came to listen as Mr. Coleman gave a speech about memory, compassion, and second chances. Then, to everyone's surprise, Tommy stepped up to the microphone. His voice shook at first. "My name is Tommy Halbert," he began. "I used to live in 1964. I was trapped in a moment that kept happening over and over. Most people didn't see me, but someone did. And now I'm here, and I'm not going back." A long silence followed, then applause. Not out of politeness, out of awe. Later that day, the principal handed him a sealed envelope. Inside was a letter from a couple who had read his story. They couldn't have children of their own, but they had followed every update in the paper. "We would be honored to meet Tommy," it read. "We don't care where he came from. We care where he's going." That evening, Tommy sat beneath the oak tree again, this time alone. He took the old photograph of himself, Marcus and Eli, now laminated and worn at the corners, and placed it beneath the soil at the base of the tree, a time capsule of the boy he had been. "I'll never forget," he whispered Dot, and as the wind rustled the leaves above him, Tommy Halberd stood up, stepped into the light, and finally walked forward, toward a future that was entirely his own.